The amulet is small enough to hide inside your fist, and that is exactly why you were handed it. Your fingers press it into torn flesh at the base of a king's throat, into a wound that nobody left alive in this room will ever say out loud. Behind you, a man whose title outranks your father 10 times over, speaks 4 words, and you understand them the way you understand a verdict, not a request. But that room is 31 years away. Right now, you are 8 years old, and the only wound you have ever pressed your hand against is a scraped knee. The smell reaches you before your father does. Natron, and something underneath the natron that no amount of washing has ever fully lifted out of his skin. He comes home from the Wabbit every evening carrying it, and every evening your mother sets his cup down a little farther from her own than she sets anyone else's. Nobody has ever explained this to you. You have simply always known it, the way you know which door in the house creaks and which one doesn't. In the market, men who owe your father money for burying their own fathers still step half a pace out of his path when he walks by. It is not fear, exactly. It is not respect, exactly. It sits somewhere between the two, in a place you don't yet have a word for. Tonight, a body is carried past your window on a plank, wrapped in cheap linen, a woman walking behind it with her hair torn loose, in the old way of mourning. Your father does not go to her. He only watches from the doorway, the way a man watches weather he has already priced. Everyone needs us, he says. Not quite to you, more to the dark. No one wants to stand next to us. This is not a story about a king. This is not a story about a throne. This is a story about the hands that touch what a kingdom refuses to look at directly. And tonight, watching a stranger's body pass your door, you think you have already learned the worst those hands will ever have to hold. 31 years from now, you will know exactly how wrong you were. A year passes, and the smell your father carries stops feeling strange to you. It starts feeling like something you're owed an explanation for. You get one, on the morning he finally lets you walk with him as far as the Ibu, the purification tent, set apart from the houses, close enough to the canal that the water carriers can reach it without crossing through the town. You are not allowed inside. You are allowed to carry the jars of water to the entrance and set them down, then stand outside, while men you don't know wash a body you can't see. The other children in the street already know what your hands have touched, even when they haven't touched anything yet. 2 boys who used to let you play knucklebones with them cross to the far side of the road when they see you coming. The same half-pace sidestep you've watched grown men do to your father 100 times. You don't ask them why. You already know the shape of the answer, even without the words for it. That evening, your father sits you down and tells you the family did not begin with him. He speaks the name of a man from generations back, Jehutimes, also called Paroi, controller of secrets within the chest of Anubis, Embalmer, scribe, a name carved into stone in a tomb across the river that neither of you has ever been permitted to enter, because it belongs to men who rose higher in the craft than your family ever has. You carry that name whether they say it to your face or not, your father tells you. Nobody spits at a scribe. They only spit at what a scribe's hand has to do. That night, a body is carried past your house on its way to the Waybet, and for the first time, your father tells you to fall in behind it and walk. Not to touch it, only to walk, and to be seen walking, and to learn what your feet already need to know before your hands are trusted with anything at all. The doorway smells different from the inside, sharper, resin cutting under the natron, and after 5 years of walking behind other people's dead, you are finally standing on this side of it, not as a mourner's shadow anymore, as someone the Waybet has decided to let in. The family that comes today is not wealthy. You watch the chief embalmer lay out the choice for them the way a man lays out bread he knows they can't afford much of. The full 70 days, resin and linen enough to outlast the pyramids, priced beyond what these people will earn in 3 years combined. A middle way, shorter and plainer, or the simplest option, natron and time and nothing else. No oils, no ceremony beyond what the law of the gods requires, and not 1 grain more. The widow chooses the third without asking the price of the others. She already knew. The rich by 70 days, the embalmer tells you afterward, packing his tools away without any bitterness in his voice at all, as if he were commenting on the weather. The poor by a bag of natron and a promise. He hands you the natron himself that afternoon, not to watch this time, but to pack it, your own hands pressing the dry salt into a cavity that used to belong to someone's husband, someone's father, filling the space where organs were until an hour ago. Your palms sting, where the natron bites into a cut you didn't know you had. You don't stop, you pack it the way you were taught, layer over layer, until the embalmer checks your work with 2 fingers and says nothing, which you have already learned means you did it correctly. Walking home, you notice the smell has soaked into the creases of your hands the way it always lived in your father's. You lift your palm to your face once, just to know it for yourself. It will be years before you stop needing to check. You'll be trusted with more next season, the embalmer tells you at the gate, already turning away, already thinking of the next body waiting in the ibu. It isn't praise, it's a schedule. You walk home feeling, for the first time, like both. Your hands are cold before the blade ever touches them, cold with a night spent not sleeping, sitting outside the waybet beside an older parishkite who says nothing for a long while. That turns out to be its own kind of instruction. They'll curse you at the door and thank you in the dark, he finally says. He has done this work for 11 years. His hands, when he holds them up between you, don't shake at all anymore. Yours already are. In the morning, the body is a merchant who died of a fever 3 days ago, and the chief embalmer draws a line in red along the left side of the abdomen where the cut is to be made. A mark you have watched drawn 100 times on other people's bodies, never once on the air, in front of your own hands. The obsidian blade is colder than you expect. You press it to the line. The moment the skin opens, the other priests in the room turn on you exactly the way you were told they would. Not truly turning, you understand even as it happens, but performing the turning. Raised voices, a stone throne that lands well short of you on purpose, hands that shove you back 3 symbolic steps and no farther. It is theater, and every man in the room, including you, already knows it is theater. And none of that makes your pulse slow down even slightly. Somewhere in the ritual shouting is the truth underneath it. What your hand just did cannot be spoken of as anything other than a violation, even when the violation is the only door into eternal life the dead man has left. Afterward, the older parashites claps you once on the shoulder, the closest thing to warmth the morning has offered you, and says nothing else. There is nothing else that needs saying. You walk home with your hands trembling in a way they didn't even on your first day packing natron, and for once your father has no answer ready for you. No old saying, no steadying phrase passed down from his own father before him. He only sits with you at the table, the two of you saying nothing, until the shaking finally stops on its own. That ritual, priests performing anger they didn't feel, a stone thrown to miss on purpose, is one of the stranger, quieter details buried in the ancient record of this trade. If a detail like that is why you're still watching, a like tells this channel to keep finding more like it. By your 3rd summer as parashites, the heat has taught you something no teacher bothered to put into words. The dead do not wait politely for you to be ready. A young official's body arrives at midday, already a day gone in weather that turns a corpse fast, and the chief embalmer, who usually stands over your shoulder, is called away to a burial across the city before you've made your first cut. You are, for the first time, entirely alone with the work. You move fast, the way heat like this demands. The incision, the reaching in, careful and hurried at once, a contradiction your hands have learned to hold without thinking about it. Lungs, stomach, intestines, liver, into their basin, headed for their jars. It's only when you're rinsing the cavity that you realize your hand came out holding something it shouldn't have. The heart. Small, dense, unmistakable once you're looking straight at it, and not simply moving through the motions your body has memorized. You've heard the story every embalmer eventually hears, how even Ramesses II's own heart is said to have slipped free the same way once, pulled loose with the rest by careless hands, and had to be sewn back before anyone outside those walls could ever know. If it happened to a king's own body, it can happen to yours. That doesn't make your stomach stop dropping. If this man's family learns their son's heart was pulled loose with the rest, the organ his soul needs whole and steady for the weighing to come, no explanation you could offer would matter. The dead don't forgive slow hands. The living don't forgive mistakes. You sew it back yourself, hands moving faster than you knew they could, stitches small enough to vanish beneath where the wrappings will sit. You check the work twice, 3 times. By the time the chief embalmer returns, there is nothing on the body to suggest anything went wrong at all, and you say nothing, and he asks nothing, and the two of you finish the day's work exactly as if this were any other Tuesday, in a life built on exactly this kind of silence. No one ever learns. You go home that night understanding, for the first time all the way down, that this trade doesn't just ask your hands to work. It asks you to carry what your hands do, alone, for as long as you live. And tonight was only the smallest version of that weight you will ever be asked to hold. Your cousin's hands shake exactly the way yours did, the first time you hand him the natron and step back to watch, instead of teaching by doing it for him. He is 11, the age you were when you first carried water jars to the Ibu door and weren't allowed any closer. 5 years earlier than that would have felt too soon even to your own father. But the guild has thinned since the fever years, and someone has to be ready to stand where you stand now. The chain doesn't wait for anyone to feel prepared. You teach him the ratio the way it was taught to you, not by number. No one measures it that precisely, but by feel, by the particular give of the salt under your palm when there's enough and when there isn't. He packs the first cavity too loosely, and you don't correct him with your hands. You make him find the gap himself, pressing until he feels where the body still remembers its old shape underneath. I didn't choose this either, you tell him, when he asks the question you asked your own father at his age, the one every child in this family asks eventually, but I got good at it. That's the only door out of hating it that I ever found. He holds his hands steady through the rest of the packing, and something in his face when he finishes, pride maybe, or simple relief that his hands didn't fail him, is close enough to what you felt at 14 that it catches you off guard. A runner arrives at the workshop gate before you've even finished cleaning your tools, out of breath, asking for the Waybet's most careful hands by name, not your cousin's, not the chief embalmer's, yours. The Père Nefer of the royal household has sent for you directly, for the first time in your family's 3 generations of this work. You don't yet know what waits inside those walls. You only know that no one in your family has ever been asked to walk through that particular door before. The leopard skin is heavier on your shoulders than you expected, and colder than linen has any right to be against bare skin. 5 years inside the royal Père Nefer have taught you more than the family workshop ever could. New resins carried in from ports you'd never heard named as a boy, techniques for faces that will lie in state before nobles instead of grieving widows. Today, for the first time, you are not assisting. You are the Sem priest, and the sidelock braided against your temple marks you as one now in the eyes of everyone in this room, whether you feel like one yet or not. The man on the table served the crown for 40 years as an overseer of granaries, not royalty himself, but respected enough to earn this right performed by a Sem priest rather than a lesser hand. You lift the ceremonial adze the way you were shown and touch it to the wrapped mouth, then the eyes, while the lector priest chants the words that give breath and sight back to a man who no longer has either. Anubis did this once, the lector tells you afterward, quietly, while the mourners are still filing out, for a god who died first so the rest of us wouldn't have to be afraid of it. He has said the line before. You can hear the groove worn into it by repetition, and only now, standing where you're standing, do you understand why a man says the same steadying words 1,000 times instead of finding new ones. Some sentences aren't for saying, they're for holding on to. That line has stayed with me longer than almost anything else in putting this together. A god embalming a god so the rest of us wouldn't have to be afraid of it. If it landed for you too, say so in the comments. I read every one. You walk home that evening still wearing the smell of resin and incense instead of natron. A smell you notice for the first time feels less like shame and more like a rank you've earned. Before you've even reached your own door, a boy from the Per Nefer catches up to you, breathless, with news that hasn't finished spreading through the palace yet. The young king has fallen ill. Badly. Sooner than anyone in the royal household expected him to need anyone like you at all. The resin is thicker than you've ever seen it poured, still warm from the fire, filling the cavity faster than any of you were trained to fill it. A king is supposed to have 70 days to become a god. This one has 11, and everyone in the Per Nefer knows exactly why, even if no one says the number out loud. He was young, younger than your own son is now, and nothing about his death was prepared for the way a pharaoh's death is meant to be prepared for. The tomb being readied for him belongs to someone else, hastily repurposed. The rites that should unfold across 10 weeks are being compressed into less than 2, and every embalmer in the room can feel the difference in their own hands. Less time for the natron to do its slow, patient work. Less time for the resins to be measured out with the care such a body deserves. You watch the chief embalmer make a choice no one trained him to make, where the ritual calls for a careful, thin anointing of oils, layered patiently across many days. He has only days left to give the boy king everything the texts demand him to receive. So he gives it faster, heavier, resin poured in quantities meant to compensate for time that simply doesn't exist anymore. A king is supposed to have 70 days to become a god, he says to no one in particular, testing the room the way a man tests ice, to see who might carry his words somewhere they shouldn't go. He has 11. Nobody answers him. Nobody needs to. You have already learned, by now, exactly what silence is worth in this trade. When the linen wrapping is finally sealed, and the boy is ready for a tomb that was never meant to be his, the god seal-bearer gathers every hand that touched this body into a single room and tells you, plainly, that nothing said or seen within these walls travels beyond them. Not to wives, not to sons, not to the gods themselves should they happen to ask. You nod along with the others. You don't yet know how many more times in your life you'll be asked to make that same promise, or how much higher the stakes will climb the next time someone asks it of you. A hand shakes you awake in the dark, 11 years after the last time silence was asked of you this size, and the only word the runner gives you before pulling you toward the door is now. The Per Nefer is already sealed when you arrive. Guards at every door who were never posted there before. Torches burning in a pattern that tells you, before anyone speaks a syllable, that whatever is happening tonight has nothing to do with sickness or old age. You are led inside past men whose faces you recognize from 100 smaller burials, all of them wearing the same careful blankness you learned to wear yourself at 17, the night of your first cut. The body on the table is Ramesses, third of that name, and the wound at his throat is wide enough that no amount of professional distance keeps your stomach from turning the moment you see it. It runs deep, deep enough that whoever did this did not intend for him to survive even a single breath afterward. Nobody in the room says the word murder. Nobody needs to. The wound itself has already said it, and every set of eyes in the Per Nefer is now working very hard to look at the wound and nod at each other. The god seal-bearer hands you an amulet, a small carved eye of Horus, the kind placed 1,000 times over for healing, for protection, for wounds the gods are asked to close. You understand, holding it, that this one isn't for the gods at all. It's for anyone who might one day unwrap this king and ask questions his family does not want answered. You press it into the wound yourself. Your hands do this the way they've done everything for 31 years. Steady, precise, past the point where fear has any say in what your fingers do. Then, the linen, layer after layer, A collar thick enough that no casual eye will ever find what your hands already know is there. You didn't see this. The God seal bearer tells you when it's finished, and you understand, the way you understood the shape of the market's sidestep at 8 years old, that this is not a request you have been offered a choice about. You carry it home in silence, and you understand, walking through your own dark doorway, that this is the last secret this trade will ever ask this large of you, and the first one you will never, for the rest of your life, be able to set down. Your knees ache getting up from the mat these mornings, a small, ordinary pain that has nothing to do with kings or throats or anything your hands once had to carry in secret. Somewhere in the 40 years between that night and this one, without your ever quite noticing the crossing, you stopped being the man other men send for and became the man other men remembered training. You are old now. Old enough that your hands have gone soft the way old hands do, no longer trusted with the incision, no longer trusted with much beyond watching. Today you watch your cousin's son pack natron into a cavity for the first time, his hands shaking exactly the way his father's did, exactly the way yours did, in a line stretching back further than even Jehutimes's carved name across the river, further than anyone in this family has ever managed to trace. You'll be trusted with more next season, you tell him. The same 4 words handed down to you 50 years ago, and you watch them land on him the way they once landed on you, not as praise, but as a door. He lifts his palm to his face afterward, the way you did, the way your father must have, checking the smell for himself as if it might have appeared there by magic instead of by 40 years of exactly this. You never tell him what else your hands have carried besides natron and resin and the ordinary weight of the dead. Some of what they've carried, you were told once, in a room sealed by torchlight, was never yours to set down anywhere at all, and you never have. Not to your wife, not to your sons. Not once, in all the years since, has the truth of that throat wound crossed your lips. The smell is still there on your own hands tonight, faint now, worn thin by age the way everything about you has worn thin. You lift your palm to your face one last time, the way you did at 14, the way this boy just did in front of you. It smells, still, exactly like the thing your father carried home to you when you were 8 years old and didn't yet have a word for what it meant to be needed by everyone and wanted by no one standing too close. You have a word for it now. You have had one for a very long time.